Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with me. And recently, I've been asked by several people, what are you going to be playing more when Diablo 4 comes out as opposed to Path of Exile 2? And it's a little bit of a hard question to answer because these games are not really out yet. And at the same time, there's still a lot of things that we don't know. But that being said, there's still a lot of things that we do know. So I've definitely made videos about this. You guys can go check them out. There's going to be links in the description below for you guys to go check out the whole playlist that I've set up for both of them. Uh, but we can still kind of assume a little bit based on not only the information that we know, but looking at the existing games, right? So thinking back at Diablo 4, I'm talking about Diablo 3, which, yeah, there's going to be a lot of changes from Diablo 3, but still, and even Diablo Immortals that will be coming out very soon. Same thing goes for Path of Exile. There's already a Path of Exile, the original, right? So I'm going to be doing kind of like a little bit of a comparison, right? So at the same time, not only will this be my thoughts of what I'm going to be playing more between these two games when they're going to be coming out, but at the same time, kind of comparing Diablo versus Path of Exile. So it's like a 2-for-1 thing here. So what I'm going to be comparing them with is, first of all, leveling. Second of all, gears. Third, the talents and skills. After that, the environment, the professions, and I guess at the end, kind of go over a little bit of my thoughts, right? So the first thing here is leveling. Now, I could actually go in and see which one is faster. There's software to do that and seeing really the difference in comparison with them. But that being said, you don't really need any software. You can definitely feel the difference between both these games. So, a Diablo game normally, as you progress, it gets harder to level. And anybody that's ever played this game can kind of vouch for that. You're you're getting into those high levels. It takes a lot more kills for you to gain a level. As a pass, as opposed to Path of Exile, you see, I can't even talk anymore. It's not like that. As long as you actually continue on that steady, you know, um, progression, I could say, uh, continuing doing your quests at your current or higher level, you're gonna level almost the exact same amount as you would in lower levels. Now, obviously, when I say the exact same amount, it's not very accurate if you're comparing it to a level 2 as opposed to a level 80, for example, but you level a lot faster. You do not have that drag that it'll take you like 2-3 days for you to gain level, which I get it. I understand the purpose of it, but for me, it drives me nuts. Leveling is great, but if it takes me 2 to 3 times as long to actually level, at a certain point, let me continue with this game, right? So, huge win for me when it comes to Path of Exile in this category. Like I said, you don't really need any software for this part over here because you can just feel it as you're playing. So, huge win for Path of Exile. Next, talking about gear. So, gear, let me start with the legendaries. So, the legendaries, I mean, like I'm comparing it in this case with Diablo 3 because it's essentially what we currently have, right? Diablo Immortal is not out yet. And even with Diablo 2, it was not by far as easy as Diablo 3, but it wasn't exactly the hardest thing to get some sets or some legendaries as well. As opposed to Diablo 3, I mean, all you have to do is go to your profession, um, like your blacksmith, and you can create your own legendaries. Like they lost all meaning. Like there's no point of a legendary anymore. As opposed to Path of Exile, well, Path of Exile is completely different in that case. You actually have to work your butt off to get one of those legendaries in various ways, right? Not only grinding, but just doing specific quests and doing, I don't know, specific events as well, actually. There's so many, I don't really know where to begin. Uh, but it's not like the random drops, right? You're not just gonna show up to a vendor and they're gonna tell you, here's a choice of X amount of legendaries. That doesn't happen here. And the best part is that when you have a legendary that's too good to be true, normally it's because it is. There is a trade-off. So some people have noticed, others I'm sure have not. And it took me a while to realize because as you're playing, they're giving, if it's like crazy stats, there's going to be a trade off of something that gets, I don't know, reduced or debuffed just because, well, quite frankly, you may not even need it. So it really may not affect you. But if you have a class that is kind of like jack of all trades, while you're looking at this amazing weapon or shield, and you're sacrificing one thing to do it to get another. Well, that's pretty cool when you're looking at it from a game perspective because it's not like they're giving you the best top of the line gear. There's still something for you to work for in the sense that, well, yes, it's a legendary, but there's still things you can get that might be better. You still have to work for something. You just don't stop grinding. So, second point here, Path of Exile, at least for me. Let's go to skills and talents. Oh my. So, if you guys have played both of these games, which watching this video, chances are you have, I think it's safe to say that Path of Exile will win this one. So, Path of Exile, if you go in, the first thing that you're going to notice is the crazy amount of talents that you can get. Crazy amount of talents. I mean, there's nothing really to say. I mean, there's so many that you're never going to get them all, even if you have all the characters in the game. And the way it works is you still have those given characters, but they don't actually have any preset abilities. The, the only way that you can actually get abilities is if you get stones and socket them into the gear, which is very interesting to me because you can have a type of barbarian class uh, character, I guess, and they can be kind of like a wizard, right? Or a mage, whatever you want to call them. So it creates a lot of customization. The talents are very unique. You can actually socket the talents, like specific areas in the talents to give you extra boosts. There's a lot, and I mean a lot of things that you can do. So I mentioned a small part, right? There's a lot more to get into, but at the same time, I don't want to make this video over an hour long, and I have made other videos in the past, so you guys can check those out as well. But looking at Diablo, well, Diablo, you have your standard characters, they all have specific spells. You can't really go around that. Um, in the new Diablo, well, sorry, in the previous Diablo 3, you had sockets, not sockets, I'm sorry, runes, which was a very interesting idea to kind of modify a little bit your spells. But I mean, it was still the same spell, right? At least that's how I saw it. And your talents, well, they're still bound to your character. You can't really customize it. So if you have two characters, example, two necromancers from Diablo 3, kind of PvPing against each other, for example, there's a good chance you guys are going to have the exact same spells and more or less the same specs. So, not a lot of fun there. I mean, you're kind of fighting in a mirror match, right? Everybody has the same necromancer. It's kind of dull. As opposed to Path of Exile, there's so many things that you guys can do and kind of explore that sky's the limit. It really is. Now, let's go to environment. So, when I talk about environment in this case, I'm talking more about leveling, questing, things like that. So, although they're going to implement a lot of new features when it comes to Diablo 4, if you think back at all the previous Diablo games, essentially what it is you're going to pass the Diablo game and it kind of resets from the beginning in a harder level, and you can kind of continue with the game like that. So it progressively gets harder, which okay, it's fine. I mean, why not? Path of Exile, although there's still some repetition when it comes to the maps, they're not all the same maps. So what they've done, which I find is pretty smart, rather than actually fix ton a ton of new maps, because I mean there's a lot of effort that goes into these games. They kind of fix like this ginormous map and they kind of cut it in half. I don't know if you guys paid attention to this. And essentially, as you're passing Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, you're revisiting these same places. But rather than, let's say, example, you were going north in that specific map, well, now that area is blocked off and now you're going south. So it's still the same map in quotations, but completely different environment at the same time with many times different mobs. So it feels like you're exploring something new every single time rather than constantly doing the exact same levels, right? So very, very interesting idea. I really like how they did it. Really did. It's very original, and you can kind of expand that a lot more if they really wanted to, which in this case they're doing because they're obviously bringing Path of Exile too, right? So one more point for Path of Exile. So this is kind of going really one way. But one thing I do like about the Diablo games, or when I say like, I would say love, is the professions, right? They don't all have the best professions. And obviously, thinking back at Diablo 1, they really didn't have one. But this is the difference between a game and an amazing game. That progression, that evolution, right? So Diablo has evolved, and I love those professions that they have because it actually does help you in your journey. So they're going to have differences, and it's gonna evolve with Diablo 4. Absolutely. One thing that I think they're gonna take away from uh, Diablo Immortal is the way they actually level their legendaries. So I find that very, very interesting the way they're leveling them. If you guys haven't checked it out, please do so. I made a video about that as well. You can actually go to Diablo Immortal website and check that out as well. Um yeah, I mean, because in Diablo 3, like I mentioned before, it was just way too easy to get a legendary, right? There was absolutely no challenge. I don't know about you guys. I really didn't care about getting a legendary anymore because I could just go to my vendor and my blacksmith, and everything was kind of there, right? It was not really a difference maker. But with the professions, at least in the new one, you can kind of level them, you can modify them. So we'll see how it ends up. So at this point, there's just a lot of rumors, but at least professions actually exist in the Diablo games. Path of Exile, you don't really have any, right? You have vendors, but nothing to take away from the vendors because although there's nothing really to help your leveling, you can still trade in some pretty, I'll say, minimal currency that you can get very, very easily to get this gear and enchant it, right? So it's up to you guys to see which type of, I guess I can call it professions in both cases that you guys prefer, because I find the Diablo one a lot more interesting. Obviously, Path of Exile is a lot easier in this case, but yeah, tell me what you guys think. I mean, I'm I'm aiming more for Diablo in this case, but they can they both go kind of like together. I think like they're both equivalent. I would give a slight edge to Diablo just because they do help you with your leveling. Right, it is a lot easier for me, at least I find, because the Path of Exile, you still have to find this extra stones or whatnot to help you enchant it and give you specific specs, and you may not like them. And now it's a whole different process to kind of remove all those and get new ones. So, talking about gear, I already mentioned one, Path of Exile. One thing I love about the gear is you can actually adjust the specs, which you can't really do in Diablo games. It's never even been heard of. So, Path of Exile, there's actual stones that you can either change, just like re-randomize your specs on your weapon or your armor. You can just remove everything and start from scratch. You can do all sorts of things to them. You can adjust it to your liking, which is fantastic. And you also have the sockets, which, yes, you have it in Diablo games, but it doesn't play the same role. So I mentioned before, this is one way that Path of Exile uses to be able to have spells and abilities, because as you're playing, as you're leveling, there's just random drops of stones that you can take, you can socket them, and now you have that extra ability. Let me give you an example. So let's say you're fighting with a barbarian or a warrior or whatever you want to call him, and just this tank, right? So normally you're picturing this guy, you're picturing this big, ginormous two-handed axe leaping towards the enemies, whirlwinds, hack and slash, which is the first thing that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about a tank, or a DPS tank, I should say in this case. But with Path of Exile, as you're fighting, let's say a Frost Nova skill drops, you can take that, add it to one of your gear, and now you know Frost Nova. So as you're fighting, a Nova of Frost kind of like explodes around you. All the enemies are frozen. Another one drops. Let's say it's a fireball. Great. Now you know how to use Firebolt. So next thing you know, you can kind of go away from a melee DPS and kind of like a hack and slash character to a mage. This is just one example, first thing that comes to mind, which is very, very interesting. And you can really play around with it. Like, again, I say, sky's the limit. Well, Diablo doesn't really have that. Right? Diablo, yes, you have runes. Yes, we'll give you some extra specs, I guess. But that's not what you get. Really, those weapons, what you see is what you get. And the legendary ones, chances are they're going to be very overpowered. So if you do not have, or if you just weren't lucky enough to get a very good legendary, then people are just going to have their way with you because you cannot really compete with them. And it's a shame. Like, at least for me, it's a shame. So thus far, I find it's been going kind of like one way, right? It feels like I've been promoting Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 more than Diablo. So why would I want to play Diablo? Well, the storyline, the lore, the history, and the gameplay. It runs very smoothly. Everything around Diablo games, for me, makes sense. It's not just a game, it, it's like a continuation and progression from Diablo 1 to Diablo 4. Path of Exile, why would you want to play it? Customization. I mean, you can do whatever you want to your character. But although they try their best, for me, lore wise, you don't compete. And there's something about Path of Exile that, at least gameplay wise, and this is just me, you guys might blast me in the comments, but for me, it's not the same. Like, it's not as smooth as a Diablo game. Even Diablo 3, and I'm sure you guys are not going to agree with me here, I find runs smoother than Path of Exile. So, I mean, this is really just a matter of opinion. What I would play more in this case would be Diablo 4. That's the first thing. I'm going to give it a chance. I really want to see how it goes. I really hope it's not going to turn out to be like Warcraft 3 Reforged. I really doubt it. But, I mean, based on everything that I mentioned, Diablo just is the right fit for me. But looking at it from a game point of view, Path of Exile does make more sense. So for sure, Diablo 4 is going to be the first thing that I'm going to play. Give that one a chance a lot more. I want to see how it is. If I like it, I'm sticking to it. If not, well, I have my backup, which great for me. It's a free game, right? So you don't have to go spend another $80 because you didn't like Diablo 4. So guys, tell me your opinion. Which one do you guys like? Which one would you play? Do you agree with my statement? If not, that's fine. Tell me your opinion and what you guys think. Love to hear it. If you guys like this content, please let me know. Subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And like the video as well. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Always fun to hang out with you guys and talk to you soon.